This is the Director's Podcast with Jeff T. Thomas, Part 2.
Let's just look at your process of how you make movies, like today compared to how much it's changed since Sleeping Dogs, your first movie. How would you say your process has changed over this period of time?
Well, in the time that I've been making films, from the late 60s through till now, the biggest change that's happened that I'm aware of is the digital world. I mean, I remember when I first came to America, I got myself a computer. Up until then, I'd been writing my scripts on, a typewriter, and you had to make numerous copies of it to, if you wanted more than one copy, you had to put carbon paper into. And anyway, I got a computer, I remember, and I go like, oh my God, I still remember the day I discovered that you could push all the words apart and put another sentence in, and nobody could even tell how it got there. I was like, fuck, this is just extraordinary. With a computer, you can push stuff around anywhere, and it's all there. Whatever you want to do, if you want to find a word, you just go to find, and there it is. And
yeah,
I just remember being so sort of elated at what a genius idea this was, that what a computer could do.
Yeah.
So when digital editing came along, I was like just dying to get involved in digital editing, because I realized that exactly the same process could happen, that, you could cut a frame off here and a frame off there and then put it back, and you'd never know it had gone. You could hold different versions of the story in the computer and compare it easily with each other. And so the first film I edited digitally was The Getaway.
Right.
With
Alec Baldwin.
And Kim Basinger.
Yeah.
And that was, once I discovered that world, I couldn't. Then when the point and shoot, they were really amateur cameras with this professional sort of potential of digital cameras that could shoot film as well.
Mm-hmm.
Could not shoot film, but shoot digital files to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember. So I was dying to shoot a film digitally, and the first film I shot digitally was The Bank Job with Jason Statham.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, early days of digital filmmaking, and not that it seems that long ago that I was doing it, but I realized how quickly things have changed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next big giant change that's happening in the film business, of course, is video on demand streaming.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I saw that, I was like, wow, how are cinemas going to stand up against this? Because, with the advent of, 4K television sets and great sound systems and big television sets, and how's it all going to fit together? I saw the potential of the future, but I also saw the sort of threat of the past. And that's where we are now, of course. And of course, the COVID virus, pandemic has done terrible things to the cinema business.
Yeah.
And totally, it's been like a giant shot of adrenaline into the arms of the streaming services.
Yeah.
And I start to wonder if there is a future for feature films, because where are they going to be screened?
Yeah. It's so difficult, isn't it, when TV seems like it's king in so many areas. Whenever you do get a great movie that comes along, there's nothing else quite like it, because
and there's nothing like sitting in a great cinema, with fabulous sound and great projection, and
it's the greatest experience.
That's where the movie business was. This time last year, going to the movies was a fantastic experience.
Yeah.
Now you fear for your life.
And no, that's one of the things I miss the most, actually, right now. Is
Me too.
The ability just to go and turn off everything for a couple of hours.
Be there in the dark, and you get immersed in a way that you'll never get immersed at home.
Yeah, there are too many distractions. That's the problem.
Yeah.
But your process as a filmmaker, has it? Let me give you an example of what I mean. I went for a talk. Steven Spielberg, James Cameron, and J.J. Abrams did a talk at the Directors Guild one year, and three great people to go and listen to. Spielberg said that when he moved from the Steenbeck to the Avid, he discovered that you can do a cut super quickly and you can try it out, and if it doesn't work, you can Control Z, you can put it back, there's no loss. But what he missed was when he was editing on film, he would give Michael Kahn, whoever his editor was at that time, his note, and then he would go for a walk, and he'd walk around the Universal lot, and he would think about the movie, and he would think about the process, and he felt like there was something lost by not cutting on film. Would you agree with that?
I couldn't. I'm the complete 180 degree opposite.
Right.
For me, it was such complete liberation once long digital editing came along.
Right.
To me, it gave, the problems of filmmaking were, in fact, that it was physical. The film was so fragile, the negative was so fragile, and the processing was always, I was always losing film and getting scratches on my stuff.
Yeah.
One of my movies, all the master negative was scratched by a incompetent person who was, logging the film.
Right.
And if it wasn't for digital technology, that film would have been a complete throwaway.
But that was, the negative was not a print.
Negative, the original negative was
cutting a
scratched.
negative? You were cutting the neg?
Well, no, the cutter scratched all the negative.
Wow.
So, I've had some horror stories of physical filmmaking.
It's pretty terrifying.
And of course, the size of, the other thing that's happened too is that the size of the cameras and the quality of the cameras is, now you've got GoPros that'll shoot as good a quality as a Mitchell ever would.
Yeah.
You've got this tiny little camera that can go anywhere.
Yeah.
You've got drones that can fly around and doing amazing aerial shots, flying out of windows and do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Filmmaking, I think filmmaking now it's a very different experience. I wouldn't say it's easier now, but there's more opportunities to be creative now than there used to be.
Mm-hmm. So you found it liberating in every way?
I do, completely liberating.
And is it liberating, also you're not dealing with 1,000-foot mags or 800-foot mags, you can continue.
Well, all of the physics, listen, there was nothing. The Bounty was a great example I had, giant arc cameras, giant arc lights.
Yeah.
There were all these Panavision cameras. It was big filmmaking, and it wasn't stuff that you could do on an amateur basis. You could only do this at an extreme professional, level.
Yeah.
And now filmmaking, if you've got the talent, you can make damn good-looking films on the weekend with your mates.
So your process on set or on location is the same then, you would say, or is it, or do you move faster now because you have it like this? Or
I wouldn't say I'm moving a lot faster. There's lighting can take a lot less time.
Yeah.
You don't have to reload magazines, so there's some savings like that. One of the things that I look at is, how did the day get chopped up? Who got what department got the most time or the least time? And often I look at who got the least time. It's me with the actors saying lines.
Yeah.
The lighting takes time. The putting down tracks and dollies takes time.
Yeah.
Hair and makeup takes time. Getting enough time to shoot the film you can be the one who's a bit shortchanged as the director. And so I think the digital world gives the director more time with the product.
But there is the danger, isn't it? As things move more quickly, the expectations for a film to be shot more quickly also come about.
Oh, I know, but it's always been a job that's had lots of pressure. I don't remember ever turning up to the set and there was no pressure.
Laurence Olivier, Daniel Day-Lewis, Anthony Hopkins, Al Pacino, Tom Cruise, Morgan Freeman, Colin Farrell, Kevin Costner, Forrest Whitaker, Ben Kingsley, Robin Williams, Sissy Spacek, Gene Hackman, Pierce Brosnan. What do you think is the greatest thing that you've learned from all of this incredible pool of talent?
Well, every one of these people are, extraordinarily talented.
Yeah.
But every one of them is also, by their own admission would say they got lucky, but they have to work hard to get lucky. So every one of them is, got a really determination about them, where they were, I'm sure, at the beginnings of their careers, they're just, as hungry as they could be, and they're still hungry.
Yeah.
None of them ever phoned it in.
But do you, before you worked with these people compared to now, what do you think you've learned from working with them? Like your approach to presenting something or collaborating with an actor, what would you do differently now?
Well, listen, there's some, you reel off a bunch of really fantastic actors, and then there's some actors that I would love to put in the list. People like Bruno Lawrence, who's in Smash Palace.
Yeah.
So, just because the names are famous and mean a lot to the public doesn't mean that me as a director doesn't respect some of the other actors that I've worked with who nobody would even know who they are. To get great people into your films is obviously a challenge, and you're only as good as the actors that you can get to be in your films. And if you get, as I've had the good fortune to have some really great actors and well-known actors work with me, that obviously helps, when you come to marketing the film and trying to sell it, you're not trying to sell a brand that nobody's heard of.
Does it get easier as you move forward?
It does not get easier as you get do more of it.
See, I would have thought that, like this, I love The Recruit, right? When The Recruit comes out, I would have imagined, like, you got Al Pacino, you got, Colin Farrell. I'm not sure who signed on first, probably Pacino, I'm presuming. But I presume it would have been easier getting actors of that caliber, especially Pacino at the time, knowing that they know that you have worked with all these fantastic...
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it gets easier to be sort of taken seriously if you've got a bunch of work that people can see already what you've done.
Yeah.
But, people can also make sort of assumptions about who you are as a filmmaker based upon what you've done and not what you want to do.
And how do you combat that?
Well, you just keep going, I don't think you spend too much time looking back. You just keep wanting... I mean, I still love everything to do with films. I still love doing. Mm-hmm. I still, love, I'm in the middle of writing a few scripts, and who knows if they'll ever get made, but it's just business as usual for me, really.
Well, talking about writing, I mean, there's something that you started your career on, and then you, as far as IMDb goes, you didn't write a bunch of movies, and then obviously you wrote The World's Fastest Indian, which is another fantastic movie. How would you say your process is different to when you've written a project to when you've been hired to direct a script?
Well, first of all, I never want to take away the writer's credit, try and claim that it's my, if somebody's written a script and now I'm the director. Well, part of being the director is to make it fit into the budget and fit into the locations available. And if you've got logic problems with a thriller, you've got to try and sort those out. And, you've got to satisfy the actors' interests. You might have somebody like Alan who's got ideas about how they want the scenes to play or a particular scene to play. So there is lots of elements that change in an original script that got everybody's enthusiasm to make it in the first place to a finished movie script. And so, the scripts that I've taken credit for are the ones that they were my idea and I've written.
Is that...
If I've been involved in rewriting somebody else's work to make it fit the sort of reality of making the film, and I'm obviously not going to take their credit away from them.
Is that, by writing The World's Fastest Indian, was that a way of getting your career back working in the direction that you wanted to work in?
Well, yeah... It's every one of my movies hopefully doesn't sort of remind you of another one. Every one hopefully has an identity of its own. Yeah. If you compared movies like Species with, say, 13 Days, they're very, very different movies with a different audience and a different sort of sensibility and trying to say something very different. But they were both great. I enjoyed making them, both of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I was about to say,
totally different reasons.
13 Days I loved when that movie came out. I saw it several times in the cinema.
Thank you.
Species I hadn't seen for a long time, so I watched it last night, and I was surprised, like the scale of that movie, and also Dante's Peak as well, which is another.
Well, Dante's Peak really is a giant scale.
I mean, I presume you have some visual effects in that movie. It's not digital in the sense that it is today, but I presume a lot of that was
everything in
miniatures.
that film is real. I mean, all those giant miniatures with the
right
eruptions and the giant lahars coming down the river valleys and sweeping away the bridge and the Humvees getting, all that stuff is real.
Real meaning miniatures, yeah.
Well, real big miniatures.
Yeah. And that's why it worked so well. I think if you tried to do any of that digitally, it would have looked more Roland Emmerich, which isn't, for me, doesn't have the same level of impact as a movie.
And I think in some ways that was, of the big scale films I've done, that was in some ways the most enjoyable because it was so challenging. And I had my own interest in geology, having, been a geology student. I was interested in the subject matter.
Yeah.
And sort of felt like I knew something about what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Trying to turn the sort of, these facts about volcanology into entertainment.
What about the volcano? Because I was surprised how good that held up. How did you do that?
Well, the volcano, a lot of it was we shot around Mount St. Helens.
Right. But you had the plumes of smoke and the ash.
Well, that was all digital stuff.
That was digital, is it? Wow.
Yeah. But some of it was real, some of it was some existing footage of real digital, not real digital, of real eruptions.
Right, because it looks real.
But we also did some pretty big scale, miniatures for the eruptions.
Right. So it was a collaboration of, collection of 3 different ways of getting it done. I know, because, you've got those 2 kids driving in the car as well, and you got the ash hitting the...
No, that was pretty, that was very demanding stuff, that.
Would you...
working at night with young kids.
Yeah.
And there had to be, there's a sequence of going across a lava field where all the tyres catch fire on the truck and all that. That's all real. There's nothing in that as digital.
Would you do it like poor man's process with the kids, and then?
Well, we had for the lava was, pink paint.
Right. Okay.
And then there was it was all, had fire laid beneath the surface of it, piped in with gas.
Right.
And then we had double windows in the vehicle so that, the fire, if nothing could hurt anybody inside the car, inside the truck.
With the stunt people inside the truck.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was pretty dramatic to do it.
Obviously, CG has been so liberating in so many different ways, but you forget how good miniatures can actually work.
Well, one thing that I learned, and it was that transition from, what I call reality filmmaking to digital filmmaking. That transition was pretty tough. So you'd try to do things digitally that should work, and then, like miniature, or you had figures that you're trying to make to stick to the wall, or like in the case of Species, they were, I had to keep reverting back to real stuff.
Right.
Because the digital world just wasn't advanced enough yet.
So how would that work? Would you say, like the first time you see the being on the train in Species, would you say, right, I'm going to give that to, we can do that in CG, and then you'd see a test and it wouldn't work out. You're like, no, we've got to.
No, I mean, like that sequence on the train where she comes out of the pod on the ceiling. Yeah. It was all physical.
Yeah, but you always knew you were going to do that one physically.
Yeah, I never imagined that I was going to do it digitally.
Yeah. No, especially at the time, that would have been a bit of a stretch for any CG. Yeah. If you were to take 3 moments out of your career, out of your entire career, what would be the 3 positive, negative, or just most memorable that you would highlight?
Well, if I take sort of positive moments, like the success of Smash Palace, when I went to Cannes was, that I realised that was nothing was going to be the same again after that. I knew that even at the beginnings of that experience. Having, movies like Cocktail or No Way Out open #1 on the weekend that they were released. And I remember Cocktail, when it came out, was the biggest opening that Disney had ever had.
Wow. What was it like working with Tom Cruise at that period of time, being such a hot actor, just coming off Top Gun?
So the experience of working with Tom Cruise was, one of the more memorable moments of my filmmaking career, I guess. I mean, Tom was obviously going to be a giant star. He'd been in Top Gun, I think The Colour of Money by that stage. And just his sort of attitude to how we were going to do this film and how he was going to, his commitment to the part. I mean, I remember going out on the town with him in New York, and he would get behind the bar and nobody would know it was Tom Cruise, serving people and get the hang of what it was like to be in a real barman in a real bar.
They wouldn't know it was Tom Cruise because they wouldn't expect that he would do it,
well,
or he would be disguised.
The last person that'd be expected to be behind the bar.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I remember one night, Tom saying, somebody saying to him, you look like Tom Cruise, but he's a big guy.
Of course, nobody.
But I just, Tom's determination to be, everything that Tom does, whether you like his work or not, the one thing that nobody can deny is how committed Tom is to everything he does. I mean, we see it even with the films he's still making. He really, really wants to give it everything he can.
I love him. I think he's such a talent.
So, I found it very, his work ethic, and you couldn't ask for any more commitment from any actor.
Even back then, I mean, because obviously...
No, I mean, we would, and it was fun to work with too, Brian Brown, who was in that film as well, an Aussie actor.
Yeah.
I remember when we were up in Canada making the film, and, we would all go out on Saturday night and have as much fun, after hours as we did making the film. And yet, of course, there was, like every other movie I've ever made, there were plenty of challenges.
Like what?
Oh, well, like we had a problem with a DP that, underexposed a whole lot of film or overexposed. There was a major 3 or 4 days work had been sort of thrown away, and we obviously had to get somebody else in, and there were sort of, issues, personality issues, and anyway, we got another DP to come in, and how things changed immediately. But those are the parts of the filmmaking process that you'd want to forget about, not remember.
Well, I think sometimes it's good for people to hear the difficulties that people have making movies, because when they have difficulties, whether they're just starting out or whether they've made their first TV show or whatever, you take solace in understanding that you're not all by yourself.
No. I mean, and listen, half the job is problem solving. Just the shit that comes along and how you're going to solve that problem.
Yeah.
And being decisive in your decisions, and obviously making the right decisions. And that starts with who you're going to get as cast and crew, and where you're going to, your locations, and the schedule that you agree to, and the budget that you say you're going to make the film for.
Would you, obviously you've worked with several of your actors many times, would you do the same thing with the DP and the editor and etc.?
Well, these are the DP and the editor and the production designer. I mean, these are the people that are the real fundamental sort of bedrock of how you make a film.
Yeah. And
so, those are relationships that we've got lots of friends that do those jobs because you're so dependent upon them. And it's so much fun to have somebody that's, you're all both on the same wavelength trying to make the same movie.
Yeah. When I was living in London doing commercials, I would have 3 or 4 DPs that I only worked with for about 10 to 15 years. And I'd only alternate between them because inevitably one wouldn't be available while I was shooting one thing. And so did you have something similar in your career?
Well, that's always been the sort of challenge, I guess, is you find really great people to work with, and then because they're so good, that other people think they're good too.
Yeah, exactly.
So trying to find people that are as good as the last one you got. I mean, the people that obviously have a lot of impact is how the movie looks and how the movie gets cut together. Those 2 jobs have enormous. But the casting people, there's no spare change out of a movie.
Yeah.
Everybody's job is so necessary to the whole process.
Yeah.
And if one of them fails, the whole movie fails.
And how would you go about picking your movies, or do they pick you? How has that process worked for you previously?
Oh, I think they sort of pick you and you pick them.
Right. Do you actively go after projects though, or that you?
No, not really. No.
So you're like producer you've worked with previously will say like I've got how did Cocktail come about, for example?
Well, I guess Disney were, they were going to do this movie, and I was, the new kid in town. I'd just done No Way Out, and No Way Out was a successful film, and I'd obviously done big scale stuff that I'd done with The Bounty, and Marie was an intimate film.
Yeah.
So those 3 films, I'm sure Jeffrey Katzenberg, helped him make his decision.
Right. So he called you or your agent, and then
I think it was through my agent.
Right.
My memory of it was Harry Affleck was my agent at the time.
Obviously, the soundtrack to that movie was a huge soundtrack. I think it went #1 at the time. Could you?
It was, I mean, the music, when I came on board, there was no music element sort of thought of. And I was like, there's got to be something extra about this movie. And I had this idea of, the bartenders could be sort of like, old Western gunslingers where the twirling of the 6 gun, the guns was sort of, that's what a great gunfighter was going to have to do. If he couldn't put his gun away with a bit of style, he wasn't not going to be a gunfighter. And I had this theory that if you could, I had seen a video or something of a guy somewhere in the valley, and thank God it's Fridays, who had this performance, where he was throw the bottles around.
Yeah.
So I tracked this guy down to the valley and got him to come in and give Tom a demonstration, and Tom immediately understood what I was trying to do. And so the sort of routines of these guys with their bottle throwing became, part of it was not originally conceived to be in the story, but it felt like this would take it to another level. And then once that happened, you obviously needed music to go with it. And so the music tracks became more and more important. And then the track "Don't Worry, Be Happy," I remember I was driving to work one day and I heard it on KCRW, and the music had already been released. And I was like, God, that could be just perfect for some of this, some of the footage. They re-released the track after it had been released. Bobby McFerrin, I think his name was, and it went to #1. And there was another Kokomo, another thing, the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
I remember one of the Beach Boys came into the cutting room and he had a little tiny dinky recorder where he had a demo of Kokomo on it, and we stuck it on top of the editing machine and played it against summer footage, and was like, God, this could be great. And, the Beach Boys hadn't had a hit for years.
So they brought a demo track to you specifically for this movie to pitch to you.
Yeah, exactly what happened.
Wow, that's amazing. And of course, that went to number one after as well.
Yeah.
Right?
And the album itself also, I think, was number one. So for me, I just, I got a bunch of songs that I really loved that I thought, would entertain as well as fit the movie and the style of the movie and all that. And we had enough actually for 2 albums, but only one album got released.
I think it's amazing that the bottle twirling and everything that seems such a mainstay, such a center point to that movie wasn't in the original script. No. It seems like so much.
I mean, and that's what a director does. You come along and you try and elevate it to another level.
Yeah.
And that was probably, in some ways, the biggest contribution that I made to it, was to introduce that element to the story and give it more entertainment value.
So would you do that? Like, did you have to pitch on the movie, or did they offer you and you accepted it and then discovered that, or did you have to pitch that to
Jeff? I honestly can't remember. I do remember having a meeting with Jeffrey Katzenberg where he was talking about No Way Out and said, if they had made No Way Out, they could have made another, I don't know, $50 million out of it or something. And they would have had a different end. And I said, yeah, but Jeffrey, I wouldn't have done the movie, would I?
Why wouldn't you have done that movie?
Well, because the whole, the story of what, I don't want to give it away in case somebody hasn't seen the movie, because the ending of it is
a big twist.
The ending is obviously a part of the story, but to me, it would have been a different movie if it didn't end like that. I
think the ending kind of gave it that punch that the movie
Well, that's
needed.
what I'm saying.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, without that, it was still a very good movie. It kept, the tension was going the entire time, and the characterization and the relationships. And Gene Hackman, I'm a huge Gene Hackman fan. How
Me too, God.
How was that?
Gene was one of the best actors I could say I've worked with.
Can you give me an example of what it was like working with Gene?
It was just so real, it was no bullshit, you didn't want to talk about what the motivation was. He says, I know what I'm getting paid, that's the motivation, so just let's get on and do it. And of course, there was no cynicism about his work, the fact that he's so real in everything he's ever done. He's got that great sort of cackle laugh that he's got, that sort of halfway between the good and bad. You're not sure. He's just got such a strong screen presence.
Are actors like Gene, who's so far along in his career when he made that movie, are they still, I guess it depends on the direction, but how open are they to, tainting their performance and, 180ing a moment if necessary? Or do you find that they come in prepared and they're locked in, or what's your experience been with people like?
What is my experience? I think part of your job as a director is to be persuasive, get people in behind, get them to see it through your eyes.
Yeah.
You don't want to be, the worst thing that you can be is if you're at loggerheads with the actor and you don't agree on how something should be played or what's the intent of the scene. I've actually had none of that in my career as far as I can remember. Usually I can, it's part of it is like getting the actor's involvement right from the very beginning and make it very clear to them that a good idea is a good idea, and we're going to make a movie that you're going to feel like you want to contribute to it. You're not going to be there standing there waiting to be told what to do. You're going to be as much a part of the creative process as I am.
Yeah, that's probably why so many of your movies have been so successful, is part why actors love to work with you so much.
No, I think, I've had some, really big names have come back and we've done more than one movie, and obviously that doesn't happen if they had a terrible time.
What about the technical side of things? Do you storyboard, or what? I can't.
Well, I sort of come to filmmaking from the technical side. So, I was a cameraman. Used to shoot when I was shooting documentaries. I was the cameraman.
Yeah.
And then I was the editor, and so I feel like I have got a deep knowledge about how films are made.
Yeah.
But I also acknowledge that other people, when that's their total focus, are going to do it better than you can do it if you're trying to do everything.
Right. Yeah. I was watching, what was I watching? Dante's Peak. You probably didn't have the money as much for Smash Palace, but I noticed there was a lot of Steadicam work in Dante's Peak.
Well, once I discovered the Steadicam, and I discovered the Steadicam on the Bounty because, they were trying to move the camera on board ship. It was obviously on a rolling ship. It's not easy.
Right.
and we had a really fantastic Steadicam operator.
Right.
And that was my introduction to the Steadicam. And so every movie I've done since then really has been, a lot of it's been shot on the Steadicam.
Is that just you like the energy of it, or is that something that's born out of the story? Or?
Well, I think, moving the camera gives a sort of story energy, and, repositioning the camera so that, the viewer can see stuff from a different perspective and doesn't get bored with the one angle. And it's, and it keeps, and it takes a really great operator to make it work well.
Yeah. And how would you develop
Nothing's
that?
worse than bad Steadicam operating.
Or you can spoil a mile off.
It's like going like this.
I saw a movie.
Good Steadicam operating, you don't even realize it's there.
Well, that's the thing. I think in No Way Out, I was so encapsulated in the story and who and what and why. I try not to watch anything on a technical basis. I think I only picked it up on Dante's Peak because that was such a technical feat. It's hard to be ignored. It's
right.
like I'm watching Dante's Peak and I'm thinking, I wonder, like, when Roger did No Way Out, did he storyboard that movie? Because I presume he storyboarded a lot of Dante's Peak because of the visual effects and the multi-levels of technical stuff that you did. Is that true? Would you, like, if you came up with a Steadicam shot, would something in the script inspire you when you read it, or would that develop on set?
No. It all comes out of the rehearsals when we were on the set. We're just going to work out how we're going to cover it.
So you wouldn't necessarily know how you want to cover it until you see what the actors are doing?
No.
Yeah, because that's...
No. I mean, storyboarding, of course, is great in sort of trying to tell the story to yourself.
Yeah.
To help you understand how, you've got to turn these words into visuals.
It's funny, isn't it? Because some directors like to develop a honest and true performance, and a blocking on stage with the actors.
Well, that's sort of what I try and do is get the actors to don't worry about where the camera's going to be. Worry about where you want to be as an actor in the room. You're going to stand or sit for this, or you're going to move from here to here, or you're going to get in the guy's face, or how's the story going to play out in real time. And then the challenge from the DP and the operator and the director is to, how are we going to get this on screen?
Yeah.
Be able to capture all these delicate moments that we're trying to get out of the scene.
And how would you feel that, obviously somebody like Spielberg has had, great success. And if you watch a movie like Catch Me If You Can, if Tom Hanks comes in, he's holding the gun and it passes on to another gun, he uses the proscenium in such a way that is kind of unique only to him at that period of time. It's been imitated, a lot since. Do you feel like you lose something by doing that or gain something from doing that?
Well, I'm not sort of aware of losing or gaining, I guess. Just find a way to tell the story and tell it so that the audience gets involved and forgets they're watching a film and gets involved. I mean, when a movie's really working, you're not sort of thinking about where the camera is or what the music is or what the effects are doing. You're just like you're in the story.
Yeah. That's something I really loved about 1917, actually. It was the fact that you don't need coverage. You got this one single shot.
It was impressive.
Yeah.
There were a few times that I was sort of more thinking about the filmmaking there than the movie.
Yeah, I have to say I started like that, and then I just got lost. So apart from the plane crash, I just got lost in the story, and wasn't.
But it's impressive.
It's
incredible. There's no undermining.
Yeah. So let's just jump into. We've talked a good few points there. A couple of other memorable moments, maybe some that you'd care to forget, or just something that would really stand out in your mind.
I mean, there was one, right at the very beginning when I was making Smash Palace. I had really no experience with dangerous stunts.
Mm-hmm.
We had a stunt where a car was to come down the road and it's supposed to look like the driver's fallen asleep and drives off the road and flips the car.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this stunt guy who said he knew how to flip a car, and we had no safety bars built into the car. He didn't have any seat harness or anything. I think he had a crash helmet on, but he had a rope that sort of was across the seat. And he said, I said, well, how are you going to? So he said, when the car's upside down, I just hug myself to the seat and this rope. And where the stunt happened, and the car sort of got, finished up upside down and got, flattened to the roof line. And I was like, oh my God, I suddenly thought that there was the possibility that he was dead. And I think at that point I realised that, your responsibility as a director to make sure that, you're not putting people's lives at risk to do something is important.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true.
So that was one of my more memorable moments for me personally.
That shot you have at the back of the race car is really going fast. I mean, it
is going fast.
Feeling
it's probably
of speed
doing 150, 160 miles an hour.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, that's as good as any motor racing.
And the guy driving it is was one of New Zealand's best race car drivers, and he came to America and became a very successful race car driver here.
Right, but he's driving on a domestic road there as well.
True.
Yeah,
it was a closed road, although we had a guy on a tractor nearly drove out onto the road while we were shooting it.
Well, that's the thing. When you're doing 150 miles an hour, it's hard to lock down that road.
We're going to be stopping for the tractor.
You're not going to stop for the tractor. Is that something that has always been of interest to you? Because obviously the World's Fastest Indian with Anthony Hopkins, that was something that you wrote, obviously based on a great true story. And obviously McLaren, the new documentary.
I guess. I mean, my dad and my grandfather both were car crazy. My grandfather was a doctor and could afford to have sort of, good cars. Right. And my dad, he just enjoyed, taking me to the car racing and doing stuff like that. And so some of that passion for motor racing stuck with me.
Yeah.
And then I was, so then with that interest, I was like, well, what about the people that do this? Who are they? What's behind their story? Who are they? And so, some of the stuff that I found interested me from two perspectives was like, what are these people like, as well as what's the sport like, or what are they doing? So the world of like Bonneville and the experience of all these people who gather there once a year to try and set new land speed records, I found appealing just because of the spectacle and the Americana sort of quality of it, the extreme sort of of what Bonneville Salt Flats is like. And the people that participate in this sport and their passion for it and their sort of commitment to risk as well as to, technical perfection.
There was a great line in the movie which you wrote. It had somebody said to Hopkins, do you ever worry about the danger? And he goes, no, my love, I'm going to butcher it. He goes, I live more in 15 minutes traveling at that speed than most people do in a lifetime.
In fact, it's a line taken from the real guy, who said, you can live more in 5 minutes on one of these motorcycles than some people do in a lifetime.
15 minutes, you'd probably come to the end of the track. Doing 201 miles an hour, which is the land speed record at that point, right?
So that film was based upon a documentary I made back in 1972 when I first came to America. Right. I went to Bonneville with the real guy and, made a film that was, half of it was shot on a camera like that one behind you.
So when do you decide you're going to write a project versus direct a project? I guess you've been so busy in your career. I'm just speculating. You have another time.
I'm always writing. There's a whole, you can't really see here, but there's shelves of sort of scripts that are half written. I'm in the middle of writing, a few right now.
What are you writing now? Anything you want to share?
I've got a good friend, Phil Cogan, who's a front guy in Amazing Race and Tough as Nails. And we've been friends for years, and Phil and I have been writing some sort of nothing like we've ever done before. There's sort of a TV series that's sort of a bit like The Castle. I don't know if you ever saw that Aussie movie.
I did, yes.
It's a sort of, quite odd slice of life movie with that you
I love Australian movies, actually.
No, there's been some really good
Nicholas
ones.
Roeg. I mean, even...
Well, Nick Roeg is one of my favourite filmmakers. Don't Look Now, I think, is a brilliant film.
It's funny, when I first started watching Sleeping Dogs, I was expecting something like Walkabout, because it started so slow and you're getting into this world of Sam Neill and then where it went was totally unexpected. It completely took me by surprise.
There's nothing better than watching a film when you've got no idea where it's going to go.
Oh, absolutely, and just get lost in the moment. But it's weird because in Sleeping Dogs, especially in the first act of that movie, you had. To my and like I said, I always watch the story. I don't dissect the technicalities of it, but it didn't feel like there was much presence of music. It felt like it was this man looking for this solitary environment, and that was reflected by the way that you shot it. It was all very simple, and it was all very pure and honest. Yep. And then by the time you get into the complexities of this hell that he finds himself in, it's a lot more chaotic and it feels more handheld, and you got the helicopters flying by and it felt like the way that you direct is what I think any great filmmaker does is tells a story from the emotional point of the lead actor at that point in the story.
Right. Yeah. That's what I try and do.
How was The Recruit?
The Recruit we made up in Canada in the winter, and it was the sort of, in some ways, a really perfect time to make it because it had a very sort of bleak look about it, and seemed to from my perspective gave the film a sort of quality that would be hard to do if it was all bright sunshine. And I loved working with Colin and Al Pacino. They were both brilliant actors, and they both enjoyed each other's company. No, it was fun to
when
do.
you got that script, when that landed on your desk, did you have to change a lot in the script? What was the process of that?
No. In fact, there was a writer still working on it when I was signed on, and so the changes that were made to it were made with the writer. So
they gave you a draft that the producer was happy with, and then you jumped on for that next pass.
Right. It was a movie that was a go movie from day one.
And was Pacino and Colin Farrell, were they on the movie at that point?
No, I don't. My memory is they were.
So that was that's how it worked back then. You'd have the studio movie, and they knew they were going to shoot it.
Yeah, if a studio says they're going to make a movie and this is the start date, then obviously it's either you're doing it or not doing it.
How do you feel that's changed today to how it was back then?
Well, it's probably a bit similar. Ever since I did The World's Fastest Indian, my world has been more independent movies.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, because some of the the big tentpole movies are these movies like the Marvel comic movies that are not really my style. So people aren't going to think of me for that as a director, and it's probably not going to be of my interest to me anyway. The movies that are the films that are of most interest to me these days are the more independently produced ones that are.
What do you think is lost by it? Because I feel like, in particular, the 90s.
Oh, nothing's getting lost. It's just you just. In fact, some ways, the sort of the story movies are being, now there's Netflix and Amazon and those sort of outlets for the product, and they've, television has gone from being a dirty word into being sort of, well, if you can get some TV work, you've still got a career that's alive and well.
And that's something that you would like to get into now. You're talking about writing your own TV series.
Yeah. No, I think there's. Listen, as long as there's opportunities for talent to do creative stuff, there'll be good stuff.
So, moving to the end of part 2 now. If you had to start from the beginning again,
if I start at the beginning again,
what would you do
differently?
Yeah.
Differently? Maybe it'd be good to know a bit more about filmmaking before I started, because I started off knowing zero, and I was living in New Zealand where there wasn't sort of anybody that I could sort of look over their shoulder. Or the first experience I ever had of seeing a film being made, I came to America here, and I had a friend who was a DP, Brick Marquardt, and Brick had done some John Ford movies. Anyway, I stayed with this guy for a week, and he took me on the set of a TV series he was shooting. And sort of in that one day I went to the set, I felt like, God, I learned more in that one day than I had in a few years of filmmaking, just seeing how a real movie got shot.
So more technical.
Well, it was fun learning and it was fun discovering, but it would have been nice to have had a bit more input before I started.
How do you think your career would be different if you had more technical?
Probably not as successful.
Right.
Probably the fact that I was sort of inventing my own sort of style and discovering how films got made. I was doing stuff that other people wouldn't necessarily approach it the same way.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because, again, I don't know why I'm talking about Spielberg, but again, second time thinking of Spielberg.
Well, he's a great filmmaker.
He's a great filmmaker, but I remember him saying in that same talk at the DGA that if he were more experienced, he never would have taken Jaws as a movie, because he didn't know the difficulties he was about to get while making that movie. No. The animatronic shark, the water, the weather, the swell, everything. It's so sometimes being a little bit more naive is a good thing.
Well, and when you don't, like when I was doing Sleeping Dogs, there's a sequence. We only had so much money, and it wasn't very much money to make the film. And there was one sequence that's in the rain, and we started shooting in the rain, and luckily it just kept raining all night. Because if it hadn't rained all night, we would have been really in the shit, because we had half it in the rain, and if it had stopped, we would have been really in trouble. But
you didn't have any rain machines to fall back on.
And if we had more money, we would have said, no, we'll do something different today.
Right. So, third and final part of the show. let's just talk about, the aspiring directors that might be listening to this. Any words of encouragement that you can give somebody just trying to break into the industry for the first time?
Well, good advice. Recently I've two filmmakers in New Zealand. I've acted as a mentor for them. Right. And the one thing I keep telling them is to trust your own instinct. Get on and do it. Don't wait for other people to give you the green light before you. Better to make 5 minutes of your movie than to make nothing. And nobody, it's hard to sometimes sell other people on what your vision is if they've got just a piece of paper. So sometimes if you've got the opportunity to shoot 5 minutes of your film or a particular sequence or something, just do that. And so you've got a real calling card where you can, somebody can see what your talent is.
Good advice. Can people find you on social media, Roger?
Not really. No, I haven't got time for that. I'm not derogatory about it. I'm just like my day's so full with I don't have enough time to do what I'm trying to do.
Fair. So how do you spend your days now? So you're writing the majority of your days?
Well, mostly writing. Writing and reading scripts. And, coming with bright ideas, talking to people like you. This is one of the more pleasant conversations that I've had. It's great to talk to somebody who's really well informed and obviously has put in the hard work to go and see your films and knows what they're talking about.
I'm a huge fan of the Hitchcock Truffaut book, and I remember reading about Truffaut and how he went and studied all of Hitchcock's movies with the diligence he did when he was, approaching a movie. So I knew going into this interview, I wanted to revisit, and visit for the first time your body of work and really give you the respect that you deserve. So,
it's very much appreciated.
Well, you've been a fantastic guest. Thank you so much, Roger
Thank you,
Donaldson.
Jeff. Lovely to talk to you.
And that's the show. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can find me at jeffthomas.com or at jeffthomas on Twitter and Instagram.
Remember 19 Media.